Hey everyone, Liam here from AFC Motorcycles in Palmerston North, and today I'm joined by my friend Brody here, and we're going to review and compare the KX250F 2021 and the KTM SXF 250 2021. There's a few changes on the KX obviously for the 21 model. Electric start, hydraulic clutch is the main ones. The engine got a bit of a revamp too, bit more bottom punch. For the KTM it's much of the same since the 2019 build. A few tweaks in there since 19 and 20, and obviously we've got the 21 here today in its glory. We're out here at Taikaria MX Park, which is just about 25 minutes out of Palmerston North in New Zealand. We thanks to Seth Henson for loaning us his 250 SXF. It is mainly stock. It does have some different wheels on it. It's got a disc guard, obviously the graphics that suit Seth, and then we've got obviously the 21 KX250F from the shop. It does have the Courtney Duncan replica graphics on it, but other than that, both bikes are very stock, so it's been really good to compare them out on the sand track today at Taikaria. So both bikes, I'll start with my feelings on the different bikes. The KX250 for me, first time I've ridden a KX in a couple of years actually, so it was quite a surprise to ride one of these, especially being a Japanese. Normally I ride a KTM. For me, the engine was actually really awesome. It had a lot of bottom end grunt, which I wasn't expecting, and it was, yeah, it even managed to pull third gear, whereas normally you find in a 250 you have to chop down to second a lot, whereas this, I found third gear, a little bit of clutch, and she actually pulled out of the corners pretty nice. The suspension coming into like a corner, I found it really stable and solid. As you'd come into the corner before you started cornering, it was nice and planted in the ground, and then you're able to get your foot out and rail around the corner. The suspension down the straights, I did find going really fast at high speed, I did find that a little bit twitchy, whereas I didn't really find that on the KTM. That was probably one maybe bad thing about the KX there, and the brakes on it definitely doesn't have the obviously Brembos that the KTM have, and it does kind of let it down a little bit, but it almost makes it a little bit nicer to control because they're not all there straight away. Other than that, it's a good riding position I found from out of the box. I know of a lot of people that have bought them through the shop already, changed the bars pretty quick and don't like the bar bend. For me, it felt pretty nice. I didn't mind it too much, and obviously having the electric start on the KX was a nice touch compared to the old Kickstarter. The KTM for me, I'm more used to riding KTMs. That's what I ride majority of the time. The 250 compared to this 250, I found this had a little bit more top end grunt, so you'd hold it in the gear for slightly longer and you'd find it would keep revving and keep providing good power for you. Obviously Brembo brakes, they are really nice brakes. It pulls up really well. Sometimes you got to get used to it a little bit because they can be a little bit twitchy if you're not used to them. Other than that, the suspension coming into a corner definitely is not as nice as this. This definitely tracks nice into a corner, whereas this you can get a little bit of head shake coming into a turn before you're settled and going around the corner. But down the straights and the higher speed stuff, I found the KTM just a little bit nicer to control and a little bit more planted on the ground as I was going through the whoops or coming into like a sweeping corner. I found it nicer to ride the KTM because it just seemed to be a little bit more stable under the high speed kind of stuff. I don't know if that's maybe because the engine might not be revving as hard as the KX and that, so there might not be as much stress on the chassis or whatever, but yeah, that's just kind of the thoughts on that. Obviously it's got actually ODI bars on it which aren't standard, but the normal KTM bend I find really nice straight out the box. And yeah, the seating position for me is really normal. The Jap bikes actually used to sit in the bike quite a lot, whereas the KTM you've always sat quite on top, whereas I found both of them were actually fairly similar today, kind of sitting on top, which is a riding position that I like to feel. Initial thoughts, Brody, on the power delivery between the two bikes?
I thought the Kawi was really smooth. Having ridden KTMs a lot more than Kawis, and I had a Kawi 250F probably 10 years ago now. I was surprised with how meaty it was the whole way through. I didn't feel like I needed to change gears as much as I would have used to on a 250F. I was pretty all-round impressed with how they both rode in terms of power. I was expecting the KTM to have more than the Kawi, but I definitely wouldn't say that was the case out here with how I felt it today.
Handling wise, fast speed and low speed, what were the differences you found, and what do you think separates the both of the bikes?
Definitely under braking, the KTM I can feel has much stronger brakes, and I found them to be pretty progressive. I don't find them to be grabby at all. But definitely it felt easier for me to settle the Kawi into a turn, and through the middle of the turn, just sat in there really nicely. But then once I stood up on the pegs and hitting the long whoop straights out here in the sand, I really like the KTM rider triangle. That the Kawi's handlebar position suits turning really well, but didn't suit the straight line as well for me. So to kind of give or take between the two in terms of how they're going to turn.
Suspension wise, Brody, under riding around, obviously we're at a sand track today. What's your thoughts on the suspension around the sand track? And obviously if we took both these bikes to a hard pack track, what would you think?
Yeah, I'd be really interested to take them to a hard pack track and compare the suspension, because I find the KTM has how it's set up to be twitchy coming into turns but really good in a straight line, and whether that when you put it on hard pack, that like if I was going to go and buy one bike today just off how they're riding and how they're set up now, they feel more at home on the Kawi, but maybe that switches around in a hard pack. I feel like they're pretty close, but definitely how it's set up, the Kawi kind of feels more like the front end's really stable and it can turn with the front end really nicely, whereas the KTM I feel like I need to get it and get the back end working to go well. It sort of feels a little bit twitchy in the sand here, but that could mean really nice tight turning and hard pack.
Out the box, Brody, for you obviously if you bought one from the dealership, what one do you think in terms of your riding ability, your position on the bike, etc., what would you feel more at home on, do you think, and obviously the type of riding that you do?
I'd probably have to say the Kawasaki, which actually surprises me given that I already ride a KTM, so you would think I'd be more used to it. But then in saying that, I'd also be tossing up the componentry and the brakes, and then I'd probably want to upgrade the brakes if I bought the Kawi, and then could I shift the position of the forks on this and maybe set it up a little bit different and move the clickers around to make it more suitable for today's conditions, and like it's kind of splitting hairs. They're both such good bikes.
So the main things today at Taikarea, the sand track, me and Brody both test rode the KX versus the KTM. Very hard to find any major differences between them. Obviously the KTM a little bit stronger under braking, the Kawi a little bit better to corner, a little bit more stable there. Both of them price pretty much very similar, $300 in it, so it is very hard to separate them both. The engine package, if you want to rev a bike out more, the KTM is probably a little bit better suited to you. If you want something that's got low, plenty of punch at the bottom, then the Kawi is probably going to be the one for you. If you want us to review anything else, if you've got any questions, feel free to chuck them down below and we'll do our best to answer them. Thanks a lot for watching.